there's no daf, and the Mishnah says, Hayum Mahalchim B'derech. Tosfos has a different girsa here on the right, which is Shisha Shahayum Mahalchim B'derech. 6 sounds like a good story there. 6 people are walking down the road, right? So that's the story. Six men are walking down the road, and Echad Ba Kenegdan. A person is walking towards them, and as you can imagine, they have a disagreement about who that person is, right? They 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, whatever. I don't know how far a person can see, but somewhere down the road, they see a car and everyone's convinced, that's so-and-so or that's so-and-so. They get into a disagreement. And one of them says, Amar Echad Mehen, one of them says, Hareini Nazir Shezeh Ploni. I commit to be a Nazir because I know that this is, Abraham, we're going to say Abraham Lincoln, we're going to call him, okay? This is Abraham Lincoln. I know it. I'm a Nazir. Now, it's a strange thing. James and I discussed this for a bit today in round 1. You're not making your Nazir conditional on that. You're so confident that you're right? That you're expressing that I'm so sure I'm a Nazir, based on that sort of surety.
We saw that a number of times before, actually, that you have people who express the fact that if they see X or Y, like on the road, they're going to be a Nazir. Are we saying that back there also it was based on the fact that they were absolutely gung-ho that was that person?
Right, so there's different. So the reason I'm saying it is exactly that point. There's different cases, right? There are cases where we've had where a person says, if the Red Sox win the World Series, I'll be a Nazir, right? Obviously, that is conditional, and you can do that, right? That we had Hilmi Yamalka. My son gets back from war, I'll be a Nazir, right? So there was clearly that. I think that's conditional. This is a little bit different because here the sense is that you are confident that what you're saying is right, but you sort of you attribute it to that thing. So we're going to see the reason it's a little bit more complex than just that is that we're going to have other cases, of course, later. Two interesting cases. One is a case which we've had many times, where you have this pile of grain, a kree, right? And you say, if the kree has 10,000 bushels, I'll be a Nazir, right? And then we had a case before that you went and the bushel was stolen, right? You couldn't figure out what was there. So what happens then? So that's one case. The second case we're going to have, which I think we'll do tomorrow, is the next Mishnah, which talks about an animal called the koi or the kfi. I don't remember how he pronounced it, which is a unknown kind of animal. And the question there is a little different because there the animal is unclear if it's a behema or a chaya, right? Whether it's a domesticated or non-domesticated animal. If you say, I want to be a Nazir on that animal's a chaya, and that I'm a Nazir, that animal is a chaya, then it's a little bit different because then there's no way to know, right? That's a suffix, that's different. Here, the understanding is that you're basically using a Nazir as emphasis to prove your point. And you're saying, I'm a Nazir that this is Abraham Lincoln, okay? That's number 1. Number 2, the second person, Echad Omar, Harini Nazir, Shein Zeploni. I'm a Nazir, I'm so confident it's not Abraham Lincoln. I like this case, okay? The third person says, Echad Omer, Harini Nazir, She'echad Mikem Nazir. I'm a Nazir that one of you is a Nazir, which seems pretty likely, right? I'm a Nazir on sort of, now, remember, we've had this discussion also before. It's a good chance to use the opportunity of what's called hatfasa. Right? Hatfasa is where you attach yourself to someone else's neder or nazir. So in this case, one person said, I'm a nazir, that so-and-so is walking down the road. But the third person didn't condition what he wanted to do on the person. He conditioned on the first person, right? So he added on. So that's called hatfasa, right? So in this case, the third person said, I'm a nazir, that one of you is a nazir. And then the fourth person said, where am I? She'ein echad mikem nazir. I'm a nazir that one of you is not a nazir. Now, Tosfos understands that this is the same, that number 3 and number 4 are saying the same thing, right? Number 3 is saying one of you is a nazir, implying one of you is not. And number 4 is saying one of you is not a nazir, implying one of you is. So that they're actually the exact same case, they're just different ways to express it. Okay, that's the way Tosfos likes to understand it. And we have a lot of Tosfot to go through. And the fifth person says, She'ein echad mikem nazir. Neither of you are nazir. No, sorry, I take it back. That was the fourth case. Sheshnechem nazirim. I'm a nazir that if both of you are nazirim, right? So the fifth guy says to number one and number two, if both of you are nazir, I'm a nazir. Now that seems to you, to me at least, to be impossible. How could the first two be nazirim, right? One said, I'm a nazir that it's Abraham Lincoln. One said, I'm a nazir that it's not Abraham Lincoln. So how could they both be nazirim? We'll see in a second. And the sixth person said, shekulchem nazirim. I'm a nazir that all five of you are nazirim. Everybody is a nazir. Says the Mishnah, Beit Shammai Omrim Kulan Nazirim. All six people are Nazirim, which again, on prima facie seems to be doesn't make any sense, right? One said that it is that person, one said it isn't. And so we've discussed this before, we've quoted this Mishnah before, and this is the opinion that we said before of Beit Shammai, that hektish ta'ut is called hektish, right? That if you donate something to hektish on mistaken assumption, you think you owe a carbon, and you give it to hektish, and then it turns out you don't owe the carbon, then the fact is it doesn't matter. The fact that you wanted to give it to hektish matters. And so that's different than a condition, meaning if you had said, I'm giving this conditionally, right? I'm going to be a Nazir if something is true, then it depends on your Tanai. But if you wholeheartedly commit to doing it because you think something mistaken is true, that's called hektish or Nazir ta'ut. And in that case, even though you're wrong, you're a Nazir. And so every person here is a Nazir because of that. That's what Beit Shammai says, because each person wanted to commit to being a Nazir under mistaken impressions, but that's Nazir ta'ut. Beit Hillel says, I disagree. Beit Hillel omrim, Eino Nazir, ela mi shelo nitkaimu dvarav. The only one who's a Nazir is the one whose words were not mitkayim, which of course makes no sense, right? It sounds the one who's wrong. So the Gemara will change this. The Gemara is going to say it means the one who's right, the one who's nitkaimu dvarav. So Beit Hillel is of the opinion that we take you at your face value, right? If it's Abraham Lincoln, then the first person's a Nazir. Remember, the third person would be a Nazir, and the fourth person would be a Nazir too. But number 2, number 5, and number 6 would not be.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And if it was not, it would be 2, 3, and 4, etc. So that's Beit Hillel. Rabbi Tarfon is an opinion which we've also seen a lot before. Says, Ein echad mehem Nazir, no one's a Nazir. Why? Again, doesn't make a lot of sense. So if you recall, and we're going to quote the Breita today, Rabbi Tarfon is of the opinion that, remember, we use a special word hafla'ah, right, which implies clarity, that in order to be a Nazir, you have to be certain at the time you make your Nazirut that it's going to take effect. And even though it's inevitable, right, if two people are together and one says, I'm a Nazir that it's so-and-so, that's Abraham Lincoln, and one says, I'm a Nazir that's not Abraham Lincoln, one of them has to be a Nazir, but neither one of them could be certain at the time they said it because the guy wasn't there, right? He was 2,000 feet down the road. So as confident as you are, it's not certain. And since at the time you made it, it wasn't certain, the fact that the person shows up 20 minutes later and you know who it is, doesn't turn that into a Nazirut. You could start over if you wanted to, but it doesn't turn that into a Nazirut. So you have to be certain at the time you make the neder. That's at least by a Nazir. Now, so that's the first case in the Mishnah, okay? 6 people, Beit Shammai says everyone's a Nazir, Beit Hillel says only the ones who are accurate, Rabbi Tarfon says nobody. Says the Mishnah, what if this guy sees everybody arguing about him and he decides to turn around and go back the other way and not come? So here, again, it doesn't have to be that case, but he turns around and goes backwards. And so he never comes. So now you don't even know who he was. And there's no cameras, right? There's no way to know. So everyone said, I'll be a Nazir if it's Abraham or not. And we have no idea who that person is anymore. There's no way to know. Says the Mishnah, Eino Nazir. So then no one's a Nazir. Now, this is very problematic, of course, right? Because it implies that if the person did come, someone would be a Nazir. But because they didn't show up, no one is a Nazir, right? And the challenge with that is that why isn't it a suffix, right? If you said, if it turned out to have been Abraham, I would be a Nazir. Now, I just don't know who it is. But why don't I live my whole life now with a suffix, whether it's a Nazir or not, right? Number 1 and number 2, let's just pick the first 2 to make it simple. The one who said it is Abraham Lincoln, the one who said it's not, both are suffix Nazir. So why do you mean they're not a Nazir? So again, this is all stuff we've discussed before, but it's good to discuss it again for review. But we understood before that the reason you're not a Nazir is because putting yourself into a Safek Nazirut is very problematic, because it's very hard to be a Safek Nazir, right? You could not drink wine for 30 days, but you can't go bring a carbon at the end of 30 days if you don't know if you're a Nazir or not. And so we said earlier that people don't put themselves in a situation where they enter into a Safek. And so basically, if I said, I want to be a Nazir, if that's so-and-so, according to at least Beit Hillel, right, where it's conditional on that being so-and-so, if the person never comes, then I would have never made my Nazirut, because I never would put myself into a situation where there was an unknown, where I couldn't, where I'm stuck as being a Safek Nazir. And so therefore, by definition, if the person goes away, I no longer had meant to become a Nazir under those conditions, and so nobody is a Nazir because of the unknown. So it's not that it's a Safek. There's no one who's a Nazir in that case. That's the Tanakam. Rabbi Shimon says, no, that's not fair. Because even though it's a Safek, right, it's not an untenable situation, because you could solve a Safek Nazir. How do you solve a Safek Nazir? You can make a second Nazirut on condition, right? You can say, Yomar, Im haya kidvarai, if I was right, and that was Abraham Lincoln, Harini Nazir chovas, okay, so I have to be a Nazir. Im lav, Harini Nazir nidava, but if not, then I'm a Nazir involuntarily. And so either way, you're a Nazir. You do your 30 days, you bring your carbon, and you move on with your life. So Rabbi Shimon says that a Safek Nazir has to observe Nazirut, right, as a Safek, and you'd have to make a condition in order to bring a carbon. And the Tanakama holds that any Safek Nazir, we get rid of, we assume you don't want it, you don't mean it, and you are absolved of the whole thing. Okay, so these are very important principles. We've had them before, but it's always good to have them again. Says the Gemara, the first part I don't understand of the Mishnah, doesn't make any sense. What do you mean Beit Hillel says, Mi shalonit kaimut varav, the one whose words are not fulfilled is a Nazir. Amai, Havi Nazir. Why do you a Nazir if you said I'm a Nazir if it's Abraham and it's not Abraham? I'm Reb Yehuda, you're right, change the words in the Mishnah. Ema, it should really say Mishan kaimut varav, the one whose words were fulfilled, which makes much more sense, right? Says Abaya on the top of Lamed Gimel now, that's not correct. Our Mishnah is telling you a unique halacha. Because remember, our Mishnah said, let's say the man or woman says, I'm be a Nazir, I'm confident that person walking down the street is Abraham Lincoln. I'll be a Nazir that's Abraham Lincoln. But then, like most people who are guessing, you immediately regret it, right? And within Toch Kedei Dibur, you say, oh, no, I'm a Nazir if it's not Abraham Lincoln. So you switched it up, right? You first said, I will be a Nazir if it's that person. And then Toch Kedei Dibur, you said, I will be a Nazir if it's not that person. You're confident it's not that person, right? So there, what the Mishnah is telling you is that the second thing is what matters. It's Toch Kedei Dibur that matters, meaning the first thing you said, which was not fulfilled, you're a Nazir, because it doesn't matter what you said first. It matters what you said last. And since what you said last was fulfilled, it was not Abraham in this case, that's why you become a Nazir. So, of course, it's nothing to do with our Mishnah. It's a really separate halacha, but we're using funny words so that you could ask these questions and learn this halacha, which is the Mishnah's MO all the time, right? So Abai says, Kigon da'amar, it's where a person said, wait a second, Inami, I changed my mind. It's not really it's different, right? Lav plonihu, I think it's not that person, and that's why I'm a Nazir. And it turns out, Ihavi Nazir, that if it turns out not to be that person, you would be a Nazir, right? And when we say, my lonit kaimut varav, your words were not fulfilled, it means lonit kaimut varav harishonim. The first thing you said, which is, I'll be a Nazir if it's that person. No, I changed my mind. I'll be a Nazir if it's not that person. The first thing you said is not nitzkayim because it's not that person, but elad varav achronim are nitzkayim, and that's what matters. And according to Beit Hillel, if what you said, so again, this is just a distraction, but according to Beit Hillel, if you make a commitment and your commitment is fulfilled, you become a Nazir. Okay? That's the first part of the Mishnah. The second part of the Mishnah, just to give a little interlude here, the question, of course, everyone asks is, why do we have so much Tosfot in such a little daf? And I don't have a really good answer, because the Tosfot actually is not on this daf. These are collected Tosfot from the last 3 pages. Right? I think the printer just got backed up, and they were like, "Let's just, we guess we're never going to catch up, right?" So I guess the
first printer wasn't even Jewish.
Well, I think the alternative would be that you'd have 8 lines on each daf. So I guess they decided, let's just cut one out and start over, kind of. The other thing that's interesting about all these Tosfots is that they're not really complex Tosfots. They're all really simple for the most part, not all. They're like Rashi here. We need Tosfot for his Pshat, like a Tosfot Harash, right? The Rush, not the Pirush Harash. And so these Tosfots are all sort of very straightforward, like Rashi type Tosfot for the most part. But they're not even this daf. They're from the last 3 pages. So they just caught up to us. So continue the Mishnah and said, if the man walking down the street turns around, turns backwards, then Eino Nazir. The people who said, I'll be a Nazir if that's Abraham, or I'll be a Nazir if it's not Abraham, neither one of them are Nazirim. Okay? Says the Gemara. The implication of that, 2 lines from the bottom, is Taima Mishum Dehertiu La'achurav. It implies that the reason you're not a Nazir is because they turned back and you don't know who they are. But if they had come, Ha'ati Likaman Havi Nazir. Right? If the person had actually walked and you found out, is it Abraham or not, then whoever was correct would be a Nazir. So who's the author of the Mishnah? Is it Rabbi Tarfon? Now, of course, we know it's not Rabbi Tarfon, but we ask it anyways, right? Because he was the most recent opinion. So if it's Rabbi Tarfon, Mihavi Nazir, would you be a Nazir if the person walked up and turned out to be Abraham Lincoln? Kivan de Beshata de Nazar, since at the time you said your Nizirut, Lo yada iplonihu ilo. You didn't know if it was that person or not. Michala ala nizirut. Would you then have to become a Nazir? V'hatanya. Now we're about to quote a Braita that says Rabbi Tarfon holds you're not a Nazir. Of course, the question is, why are you quoting a Braita? He just said in the Mishnah, right? Why are you saying it can't be Rabbi Tarfon because Rabbi Tarfon said you're not a Nazir? Rabbi Tarfon just said that in our Mishnah. So Tosfos says the reason we quote the Braita is because the Braita gives a reason for Rabbi Tarfon. The Mishnah just said it. The Braita explains it. So we want to quote the Braita. So it says the Gemara of Tanya. We learned in a Braita in Tosefta. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Mishum Rabbi Tarfon. Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Rabbi Tarfon, Ein echad mehem Nazir. None of these people are Nazir. Neither the one who said I'll be a Nazir if it's so and so, or the one who said I'll be a Nazir if it's not that person. It's not Nizirut ela hafla. Nizirut is only there when it's clear cut, and so only if there's clarity. At the time you make the Nizirut, whether it's the person or not the person, or the Nizirut is chal or not chal, that's the only time it has effect. If it can't be known at that time, but can only be known later by further events or further information, then you're not a Nazir. So it can't be Rabbi Tarfon. Ella says the Gemara, it's Rabbi Yehuda Dekrihu. It's Rabbi Yehuda. Now, of course, Rabbi Yehuda was not a player in our Mishnah, right? So the easiest understanding of this is that it's Beit Hillel, right, who said you're a Nazir if it finds out to be what you said. But if the person turns around and you don't know, then even according to Beit Hillel, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not a Nazir, not even from Suffolk, right? Because of what I explained in the Mishnah. So that's the Rabbi Yehuda Dekrihu. Rabbi Yehuda, in the case of the pile of grain, the bundle of grain, the Tanya, that case, which again we've quoted before, is Hareini Nazir. A person says, "I'll become a Nazir." Al minat she'ehei b'kri hazeh mea kor. If there's 100 core in this kri, right? We had a great harvest. I don't know how much was there. If we were successful in getting 100 barrels, 100 bushels of grain, I'll become a Nazir. Okay, which is the kind of thing that it seems like people used to do. So then you got to go find out if there's 100 barrels. So the official measuring people, right, from the Guinness Book of World Records go, halach umatzu sheganav sha'avad. There's no grain. It was all stolen or all lost, right? I'm not sure how it gets lost exactly. I guess it blew away or something. The animals ate it maybe. But either way, you get there and there's no grain. So I have no idea if there was 100 barrels. Now there's no bushels, sorry, right? But I don't know if there ever was 100. So I don't know if I'm a Nazir or not, right? So now that's very similar to this case, right? Because if you arrive there, according to Beit Hillel in Rabbi Yehuda, and it turns out there's 100 bushels, then you become a Nazir, right? Now you arrive there and you have no idea if there's 100 bushels. So says Rabbi Shimon, Oser, you're Oser, meaning you're a Nazir, because we have to assume there might have been 100 bushels and you're a Nazir. Now, the Rashi points out, the Gemara said this earlier, that according to Rabbi Shimon, you have to make a condition. You can't just be a Nazir, right? Because there might not have been 100 bushels. So you have to make this t'nai that you made in our Mishnah. Remember, that was Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah. You have to make a condition. If there were 100 bushels, I'm a Nazir, for real. If there weren't, I accept to become a new Nazir because from now, and then you observe your Nazirut, and then you bring a carbon, right? So you can't just do it because you don't know for sure if you are a Nazir. But
And
you
you
have to
couldn't bring all the korbanot if it were a suffix.
correct. You couldn't bring the karbanot if it was a suffix because you can't bring a karban that isn't necessary, right? So Rabbi Shimon says you're oser. Rabbi Yehuda matir. Rabbi Yehuda says you're permitted, and that's the Rabbi Yehuda of our Mishnah, which is if you know for sure that there's 100 bushels, you're a Nazir. If the man walking down the street turns out to be Abraham, you're usher. But since they turned around and you don't know, or in the case of a pile, someone stole the all the grain. Since you don't know, we absolve you of your Nazirut. It's not a suffix because we say, like I said before, that you would have never made this Nazirut if it introduced you into a place where you couldn't know for sure, right? So we'll read that all inside now. Rabbi Shimon Savar, Rabbi Shimon holds, we'll read half of it at least. Rabbi Shimon holds, Kivan De'ilu lo nignav, right? If they hadn't stolen the grain and you got there, Dilma Havi Be Mea Kor, so there might have been 100 Kor, and therefore Havi Nazir. So Hashtanami, now that it was stolen and you don't know what was there, Havi Nazir, you got to assume you're a Nazir, at least misafek, and you've got to do what I told you to do, which is make a condition that you become a Nazir Vadai. So Hachanami in our Mishnah, the same thing would be true according to Rabbi Shimon. Kivan di ata the kaman. If the person walked up to us, v'yadinan diploni havi, and we found out positively that it was Abraham, then havi nazir, the first person would be a nazir. And so therefore, hashtanami, here too, when it's a suffix where they turned around and walked away and you never found out who it was, according to Rabbi Shimon, you would be a nazir. Now, of course, that we're missing the main point, which is, and according to Rabbi Yehuda, you wouldn't be a nazir, right? We're speaking out the negative. I'm not sure why exactly, but the point here, of course, is that according to Rabbi Yehuda, in Beit Hillel, right? Because according to Beit Hillel, if your condition is fulfilled, you're a Nazir. According to Rabbi Tarfon, you're not a Nazir no matter what. But according to Beit Hillel, you're a Nazir. If it's Vadai, you become a Nazir. But if it's a suffix, then you don't have to even do it misafek, according to Rabbi Yehuda, because no one would willingly put themselves into that situation. And if you end up in that situation, we assume you didn't want to do it. Okay? That's. I think we should stop here, unless you want to finish the parak. I think we'll stop. Not that long.
I'm willing to finish. If you want.
Okay, let's finish it. Why not? Right?
You're the teacher tomorrow, so
it's true. Well, I'll do it again tomorrow morning quickly. There might be other people on. We'll see, but we could. I'm happy to do everything a few times. Says the next Mishnah, a similar case, but a little bit more complex. Ra'a et takfi, right? Again, I don't really know how to pronounce this. Boy, or kfi, I don't know if you say the vav. I don't know if any. Anyways, you see this animal, right? I don't know how how Steinsaltz translates it, but you see this animal that's this enigmatic animal. We don't know if it's a behemah, if it's a chaya. We don't know if it's wild or domestic.
So Steinsaltz does a long translation. Someone saw a kosher animal with characteristics of both a domesticated animal and a non-domesticated animal.
Fair enough. That is exactly what it is. But what do they call it in art school?
It doesn't. It says koi, but what it says that it's the offspring of a he-goat with a hind, or as some distinct species, not a hybrid. I don't even know what that means, but
so the note here, which is I happen to know is from Rabbi Slifkin, because he told me that he did the animal notes in the Koren Steinsaltz. Many problems arise in trying to identify the koi. It is mentioned numerous times in the Mishnah of the Gemara, not because it's a common animal, but because rather it is useful in discussion to explore the holocaust of domesticated animals versus wild animals. As early as the Mishnaic period, the sages disagreed on the identification of the koi. Some maintain there's a hybrid born to a goat and a deer. There you go, Miriam, or another kosher wild animal. According to many researchers, the koi is identified as the water buffalo. There are allusions to this identification in some medieval Rabbinic sources. Others reject this idea and claim the water buffalo did not live in Eretz Yisrael during the time of the Mishnah. I don't think they live there today. That's me. When the koi was first mentioned. Others maintain the koi is the muflon, a subspecies of wild sheep, although there are a number of opinions as to which specific subspecies of muflon it may be. There's also uncertainty with regard to the origin of the term koi and its proper vocalization.
Right. Well, that's what anyway, so in Chulin, we had a lot of discussion because obviously, chaya, you have to cover the blood and there's certain rules. And
right. That's what it says here.
Yeah. So that's where we had a lot of technical questions. So here you see this animal, and again, I don't know if it's one species or if it's a different, right? You said it could be many, maybe it's many animals that fit this characteristic. but you see the animal, the koi, we're going to call it. The Amar, and you say, Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya. I'm a Nazir because, I'm confident this is a chaya, and I'm a Nazir that this is a wild animal. And then the next guy says, Hareini Nazir shezeh eino chaya. Okay. And the third person says, Hareini Nazir shezeh behema, which seems to be very similar to the second one, right? But it's its own terminology. And the fourth one says, Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh behema. And the fifth person says, Hareini Nazir shezeh chaya ubehema. I think it's both. Okay, that's conceivable. And the sixth person says, Hareini Nazir she'ein zeh lo chaya v'lo behema. It's neither, right? Which, again, I don't know what it would be then, but it's neither. So all of those, so those six people are all opining on the identity of the animal. The next three people, though, are making comments about the first six people, right? So then the next number 7 says, Hareini Nazir she'echad mikem Nazir. I'm a Nazir. Again, this is what we call hatfasa, that one of you is a Nazir. So I'm a Nazir if one of you is. Or Hareini Nazir she'ein echad mikem Nazir, which again, according to Tosfot before, means the same thing, that one of you is not, right? It's only if all of you are. And this ninth person says, Hareini Nazir shekulchem nizirim, hare kulan nizirim. All of these people, all 9 are nizirim, which seems a little bizarre, unless you hold like Beit Shammai. Remember, Beit Shammai is the one that says everyone is a Nazir, because even if you're making a mistake and you don't really know what the animal is, you're trying to make yourself a Nazir. The challenge, of course, is that it's very unusual for a Mishnah to go according to Beit Shammai, but that's what the easiest explanation, which Rashi or the Pirush on the side says here, that it's called Nazir Ta'ut, and Nazir Ta'ut is Nazirut. Says the Gemara, Tani Chada, one Tana taught this Mishnah and said Tishan Nizirim, that there are 9 Nizirim in the Mishnah, right, which makes sense. But Tanya Idach, another one said Tisha Niziriot. Now, Niziriot is not female Nizirim. It's the object, right? There are 9 Nizir periods, right? You're a Nazir 9 times. So now the question, of course, is how can you be a Nazir 9 times? So if you said, I'm a Nazir that this is a behema, and I'm a Nazir that's not a behema, I'm a Nazir that's a chai, I'm a Nazir, you can't make up your mind. Right? Would you become a Nazir 9 times? Now you might. The problem is at the end of the Mishnah makes no sense, right? You can't then say, I'm a Nazir that one of those people are Nazirim if it's talking about yourself, right? So let's read the Gemara. So Bishlama.
Well, maybe Beit Shammai would hold that way.
Well, let's read the Gemara. Bishlama Tisha Nazirim. If you're talking about 9 individuals, that's easy, right? You go into Habi Gavri, Tfei, the Itfis v'azobe, right? There's many people, like 9 people, who keep adding on and saying, I'll be a Nazir if you are, I'll be a Nazir if you're not, etc. Elatisha niziriyot, l'chad gavre, how do you find, 9 for one person? Bishlam, I understand the first 6, that's easy. Shit mishkachet lak, it's not, as we said in our Mishnah, where you say you're very unsure. I'm a Nazir that's a chaya. No, I'm a Nazir that's a behema. I'm a Nazir it's not, etc. But avotlat hechi mishkachtla. How do you find the last 3? Right? How do you comment on yourself? I'm a Nazir if I'm not a Nazir, kind of thing. Amar of Sheshet. I'm going to give you a very simple explanation first. Said Rav Sheshet kigon da Amar. You know what would happen? So this is one explanation, not the only one, where there are 9 people who are, at least 9 people who are, or 8 people who are saying all these things, and then the last person shows up and says, Hareini Nazir unazirut hakol alai. I'll do all of them. I accept all the responsibility. So that's where we said, oh, you're a Nazir 9 times, right? Because since there are basically 9 scenarios in the Mishnah, the fact that you then at the end came and said, and I'm a Nazir equivalent to everybody, makes you all 9 of them. But that's of course not what we said in our Mishnah, right? Our Mishnah didn't have that girsa, but that's how you'd have to understand it. So that is one pshat. I would say the problem with the pshat, of course, is that it sounds like maybe it should be 10 times, right? Hareini Nazir unazirut hakol alai might be me plus 9, so that's one issue. But the bigger problem, and there's a long, I don't know who the Mefarish is, but in this Mefarish, it's called Rashi though, but he brings a Lishna Achrin on the bottom where he goes through a whole nother pshat, which tries to say that this is not going like Beit Shammai, that in fact this is going like Beit Hillel. And the reason that Beit Hillel would say that you're required to be a Nazir here is because it's a suffix, right? Because unlike the person walking down the road, it's either, Abraham Lincoln or not Abraham Lincoln. right? So one person's a Nazir and one person's not a Nazir. But with this animal, we don't know what the animal is. So since there's a factual issue here, right, it's very different. You're picking a cross species, which is unknown, whether it's a chaya, a behema, or some other category. And you're saying, I'll be a Nazir if it's this. Well, there's no way to prove it's one or the other. We just don't know. And so basically, according to that interpretation, all 6 of the people are a suffix Nazir, because they might be right and they might be wrong. It might be a chaya, it might not be a chaya, it might be a behema, it might not be, it might be both, it might not be, right? In which case, that's a suffix, right? So you can't act on Nazir for sure, like Beit Shammai would say, but you'd have to make 6 conditional Naziriyot, right? And say, if it's truly a behema, then I'm a Nazir for that. If not, I'm adding a new one. If it's truly a chaya, it means say them all like that. And then the last 3 are you as well. So it would be 9 according to Beit Hillel, but you'd have to make a condition for each one. So that is a very interesting way to think of it. And that is actually, Tosfos says it as well in the end, this Rashi. And that's why maybe it's better not to commit in these cases.
Well, I don't know. In the first place, fundamentally, I really don't understand this whole thing. But why would you want to be a Nazir? Why? I mean, we say that like
that's the question.
is a bad thing, right? That's like
first of all, not everyone agrees with that, right? But we did say that. I mean, remember, that's one of the opinions. But yes, it's the one that's certainly adopted itself, but not everyone has. There's an argument about it.
Well, there's a general question, Miriam, that why do people take on chumrot beyond the letter of halakha? They're unnecessary and quite quite a hassle to keep. And we see that a lot in the Orthodox world.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing. Usually you take on a chumrah because you want to make sure that you're going to do something the right way. This is not this. This is like,
I would guess, Miriam, though, again, it's hard for me to know that you see in the Tanakh as well, that there was some, viewed closeness to God that was associated with this, or benefit, or schut, right, kind of thing, that it made you into a better person in some way.
Okay.
Clearly that's the narrative. Now the question of, as opposed to doing other things and exactly what it means and why, if you're arguing with your friends over whether a bird is an eagle or not, you would say, I'll be a Nazir that it's an eagle. It's a very bizarre.
It is.
I guess it's emphatic because you're accepting, like, I'm willing to put myself on the line to prove my point in some way. So it is a sacrifice. It's a huge sacrifice, right? Especially the karbanot and but I think there's all kinds of aspects to it, but clearly it was much more part of the culture that.
Well, obviously,
But I agree. It doesn't make as much sense to us. That's for sure. Okay, we'll stop there.
You.
I'm sorry we won't see you tomorrow morning,
Thank
but
you.
take it. 7:45. I'll put it on the WhatsApp.
Thank you.
Thank you. Shabbat tov.
Shabbat tov.